leave you out there. Okay. You got one ready? No. What's the last one? Army. Okay. All right, let's do it. Secretary Jones, I'm Josh. Hi, Josh. Pleasure to meet you. I'm going to put this mic on
okay,
there for you.
sure.
Right.
On my fancy tie there.
Yes.
All right, I can put this in my. Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
Clip on the back. We'll adjust the volume.
Okay.
You're
Can I
muted
put
right
it
now.
in my pocket? Is that all right?
It should be, yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Great.
Local media coming to cover it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Great.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Today we have a great honor to have Maurice Jones with us. Maurice was appointed the Secretary of Commerce and Trade for the state of Virginia by Governor Terry McAuliffe in January of last year. Mr. Jones has a JD degree from the University of Virginia. He's got a bachelor's in political science from Hampton-Sydney College, and he attended Oxford University on a Rhodes Scholarship. Before becoming the Secretary of Commerce, Jones served as Deputy Secretary for the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development from 2012 to 2014. Before moving into government service, Mr. Jones was president of Pilot Media, the largest print and digital organization in Hampton Roads, Virginia. He joined Landmark Media Enterprises, the owner of Pilot Media, in 2005 and was the vice president of Landmark Publishing. Mr. Jones has been an attorney, served in private enterprise, in communications, and now serves us as a public servant in the United States federal government. Not wanting to take up any more time, Mr. Jones, come on up and join us. Perfect. We're really looking forward to your remarks. Thank you.
Let's see if this works. You all hear me all right? I could probably do this without this now, right? Well, thank you for that kind introduction. It's nice to be with you. It's nice to be out of Richmond on a beautiful day like today. It's nice to be up here with you. I thought I would, I think we've got, 45 minutes or so? I'll try to spend a little time talking to you about what I see in my current job. My current job, I'm the Secretary of Commerce and Trade for the state of Virginia, which means I get up every day trying to make sure that Virginia's economy is going in the right direction, or at least that the public sector is playing a role in that. And then I'll try to answer any questions for you that I can. So let me, I've been in this job about 20 months. Before this job, I was at HUD. I was the number 2 person at HUD, and we can talk about that as well. I'll try to mix that in. But let me tell you how the Virginia economy is doing and put it in the context of the overall economy, because I think this will give you some sense of what I worry about. Virginia is and I'm biased, so I should say that at the outset. I'm born and raised, and with the exception of 3 years in grad school, I've been in some part of Virginia for the remainder of my life. But Virginia is an incredibly blessed state. We have great universities like the one that we're sitting in today. In fact, if you look at Virginia right now, we've got over 500,000 students in university studying for associate, bachelor, master, PhD degrees. We have about 23 community colleges within this higher education system. There's a community college in Virginia within 30 miles of every resident of the state. Last year alone, we conferred in that higher education system over 82,000 degrees, BAs, master, PhD, associate degrees. We've got, in fact, the 11th largest higher ed system in the country right now, right here in Virginia. That counts for a lot, and I'll try to tie this in for you in a little bit. We have 20,000 PhDs, 20,000 plus PhDs in Virginia in the sciences and engineering, two very coveted disciplines in this world today. We have, at last count, not Silicon Valley, but the state of Virginia has the highest concentration of workers in the private sector with technology experience, 1 in 10. I was just out in Silicon Valley about a month ago, and I was telling them all this. Should have seen their faces. They were like, get out of here. Go back to the East Coast. The deepest port on the East Coast is in Norfolk, Virginia. It's the Port of Virginia. It is already deep enough right now today to receive these very large ships that will begin to traverse the Panama Canal once the widening of it is completed, supposedly now in 2016. Virginia's port is the only port right now on the East Coast that is already receiving these kinds of ships. And by the way, I was in New York recently, and they're raising the Bayonne Bridge to receive these ships. The irony is they're raising the bridge with the help of a Virginia company. So I called that company up. When I got back, I said, take your time. No, I didn't. That part's not true. That part's not true. But an incredibly great asset when it comes to economic growth. Veterans. Virginia has 800,000 veterans who live in Virginia right now. It's the highest concentration of veterans per capita of any state in the country. In fact, 15,000 veterans a year exit the military in Virginia. Many of them go outside of the state, but at least 2,000 a year decide to make Virginia their home. That is a great, very coveted population of leaders with great skill sets that our businesses are desirous of. If you look at how the economy is doing, Virginia has a 4.5% unemployment rate. That is the lowest in the Southeast. That is actually the third lowest east of the Mississippi. We've got about 3.82 million jobs in the state right now. That employment level is one of the highest on record in the history of the state. In fact, at one point this past summer, we hit the highest level. We've had sort of 17 consecutive months of growth, of year-over-year growth. I could go on, but the point is, this is a pretty blessed place to be. Now, given that you're studying public policy and leadership, here's the real deal, though. We have, amidst all of this good news, we have a huge risk in the state of Virginia that we're wrestling with. The risk is probably best articulated with the following example. Who knows who the largest employer in the state of Virginia is? Take a guess. Yes, ma'am. That's right. The military, the U.S. Department of Defense. Who knows who the second largest employer is? Take a guess. Nope. But it would be a good guess. Second largest. Walmart, come on. How could you not get that? Walmart is the second largest. But let me see if I can find some data for you here. Let me give you a list, and then you'll see. So the largest is the Defense Department. Second largest is Walmart. I'll give you the top 20. How about that? Number 3 is Fairfax County Public Schools. Number 4 is Huntington Ingalls. If you know Huntington Ingalls, they're a military contractor. Right? They do 2 things really well. They make aircraft carriers, and they make 1/2 of nuclear submarines. The other half is, they only make, I think they switch which half they make. This is public policy, right? So the deal was hatched at the federal level in the Armed Services Committee that used to be chaired by Senator Warner of Virginia, that Virginia was going to make some of those nuclear subs. So the compromise at the federal level was Huntington Ingalls made 1/2, another contractor to the military makes another 1/2 in a New England base. And it's been that way for quite some time, and they decide who puts each one together. It's pretty wild, but you go down to Newport News, you'll see it being done. But they're the 4th largest employer in the state, 23,000 employees or so. Centera Healthcare, number 5, Food Lion 6, the Post Office 7, the County of Fairfax 8, 9 is HCA Healthcare, 10 is the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, 11 is Prince William County School Board, 12 is Capital One, 13 is the City of Virginia Beach Public Schools, 14 the County of Loudoun Public Schools, 15 Inova, 16 the University of Virginia, 17 Tech, I know you like that, right, Virginia? 18 VCU, 19 Lowe's, 20 U.S. Department of Commerce. What stands out for you in that list of our top? By the way, top 20 employers employ way more than 20%. You know, if I broke down top 20 employers, you'll see that it's more like an 80-20 rule, right? That 20% of your largest are employing 80% of your jobs. Not quite 80-20 here, but they're disproportionate when it comes to the number of jobs being produced. What pops out to you? Come on. Well, that's one, reliance on the federal sector, reliance on the public sector. 13 of the top 20 are in the public sector, right? They're either, by the way, I should have said this to you, so defense is the largest, but it's not a close race. They are double the size of Walmart. And that's only if you look at civilian employment. If you added active duty, they would be larger than the top 4 combined. So from the perspective of someone who's worried about the health of the economy, the big challenge is, amidst these great data that I gave you to start with, the huge risk is imbalance, right? Who's a Denver Broncos fan and wants to admit it? Nobody. Well, you know who the Broncos are. You know who their quarterback is. Who's their quarterback? Peyton Manning, one of the best who's played the game, and I'm biased. Peyton Manning has a great day. Nobody can beat Denver. Nobody. Peyton Manning has a bad day. The Cavaliers will kick their butt. This year. We have a Peyton Manning challenge in our economy. When the federal government, particularly when the Defense Department is spending, Virginia's economy soars. When the Defense Department in particular is in contraction mode, Virginia's economy feels it like no other economy actually in the country. And so, we had 0% growth in Virginia's economy last year. Why? We lost 22,000 jobs from defense cuts alone. We are the #1 recipient of defense contracts, $60 billion a year. So what I worry about the most is how to get more balance in our economic growth engine. And so what we have focused on is trying to do those things that the public sector can do to help private sector, non-public dependent growth. We want to get every opportunity we can get from being in proximity to Washington, D.C. Don't get me wrong. The FBI right now is considering moving out of Washington. We want them to move to Virginia. And we're going after it with gusto. It's 11,000 additional jobs that Virginia could attract. However, our big challenge is building in more resilience by having more balance in where the growth can come from. So we want more private, non-public dependent growth. Now, traditionally, what that means for economic development is go out and hunt companies and bring them home, right? What new thinking is teaching us is that job growth, healthy economies, economic development is a multidisciplinary endeavor, much more so than that. And so we're focusing on 5 areas that we need to do well. If you want to have a healthy economy, you first and foremost have to have a healthy infrastructure. That means, yep, you got to have highways and byways that can move goods and people. But it also means that your residents must have access to broadband. So you can take that for granted here at the University of Virginia. However, in rural Virginia, 55% of our residents do not have high-speed internet as defined by the FCC. 55%. Hard to attract a business, hard to help people start a business, hard to help folks start businesses from their homes if they don't have access to something as fundamental as broadband. So we've been spending a lot of time trying to marshal resources to get more broadband penetration in rural Virginia. Now, it's a tough nut to crack because for the broadband companies, an essential to making it work economically is density of population. Guess what? That's not what exists in rural. I grew up in rural Virginia. My town, how large is the freshman class at UVA? 3,500, the freshman class? I figured it was like 2,000 or so. My hometown is 1,200 people. The freshman class is larger than my hometown. So the issue becomes in rural Virginia, how you aggregate enough density to make it economically attractive to our broadband companies, and or how you subsidize it or find other alternatives. So the public policy challenge there is, what can the public do to incent a market where the market has a huge flaw? And in some cases that means subsidy, and and that subsidy may last for a while and then you pull out. It certainly means we need some incredibly good planning at local levels, and we need a way for our local rural areas to collaborate. We need vehicles for collaboration that we don't currently have. So broadband penetration in rural Virginia, huge public policy challenge. I would tell you broadband penetration in rural America is a huge challenge. But if you don't have it, hard to have growing communities. That's infrastructure. Another piece of infrastructure that people don't tend to think about is energy. So we are very engaged with several natural gas pipelines now that are under some form of either construction or development. They are controversial because there are environmental concerns that relate to these pipelines or this infrastructure and this natural gas traversing the state, and there are property rights issues. You have property owners whose property will either be interrupted or in many cases actually taken. But here's the economic development side of this coin. We are now right up against the largest deposit of natural gas in the world. Just a couple states, or one state actually, to the west of us. There is a proposal to take a pipeline from West Virginia, traverse 13 cities and counties in Virginia, end up in Hampton Roads. Natural gas, access to natural gas is a game changer when it comes to economic development. The largest employer in West Point, Virginia, a small town that relies on a few employers, converted from coal to natural gas, saves $1 million a month. If you can show access to natural gas in many parts of our rural parts of Virginia, your ability to attract jobs is incredible. What's happening, and this is a global phenomenon, it used to be companies would run to China, for example, because the wages were just incredibly lower. And so the cost of operating was incredibly low. Now, Virginia is actually competing and winning deals from China. They're doing that because wages have grown in China. The largest growing middle class in the world is in China. To keep it growing, they've got to pay better and better wages. The wage differential has actually shrunk, and where we are actually much better is on the energy cost. So if you combine that lack of a wage differential to the extent it used to be, plus the great advantage we have in energy costs with natural gas, plus if you want to reach the North American market, it turns out Virginia sits within a 10-hour drive, depending on who's driving, of 55% of the U.S. population. Those things have combined to make us now, Virginia and other states on the East Coast, competitive with China for jobs. And that'll just get better. but that natural gas piece is a part of it. And just for your information, as we sit today, there are already 3,000 miles of natural gas and other pipeline infrastructure under the earth in the Commonwealth of Virginia alone. It can be done well, but no question we've got to consider all the things that need to be involved and need to make adjustments. Infrastructure, that's theme one. Second theme for us is, from a public policy standpoint, you have to make sure you're keeping a climate that is inviting to starting enterprises or to growing enterprises or to bringing enterprises that are not currently here. What that means is, yes, you got to keep your taxes low. Yes, you got to keep your regulatory environment lean and commonsensical. And yes, you have to have incentives to help people expand or to compete to attract folks. So for us in Virginia, we have financial incentives and we have incentives that are regarding training workers. And we have to compete every day using those incentives. In addition, we have low taxes and pretty smart regulations. Now, but I'll give you an example of, so our corporate tax rate is at 6%. It's been 6% since 1972. You know what happened in 1972? What happened in 1972? This will tell you how long ago it was. Come on. Well, that's true. We actually had the oil crisis. Watergate also happened in 70. But that's not what I was thinking about. The Miami Dolphins won the Super Bowl. The last time they won the Super Bowl, right? But to give you a better sense of just how long our corporate tax rate has been at 6%, in 1972, I had an afro. So it's been 6%. That wasn't supposed to be that funny, actually. It's true. It's been 6% for a long time. And when we moved it to 6%, we had an incredibly attractive asset, if you will. But now, that's where all the surrounding states are, if not better. So we have to look at lowering it even further. The point is we have to make sure that Virginia is a low-cost environment for businesses to get started or for us to attract. So you have to compete. So that's the second theme. Third theme for us is entrepreneurism. And you know a lot about that here. I won't dwell on it. What I will tell you is if you look across the country, businesses that are a year or less in age have contributed, on average, 3 million jobs a year to the U.S. in the last few years. Businesses that are older than that have contributed, on average, 1 million jobs. Small startup organizations are huge, huge job growers, if you will. And so we have a great interest in making sure that we have a great climate for entrepreneurism here. So there are several things that we're doing that's being done all across the state. We've had business plan competitions. We are looking at ways, since we're in university, we're looking at ways we can work with universities to make it easier for students to launch their own enterprises. And that gets into some intellectual property issues. It also gets into some fees that you currently have to pay. So stay tuned. We're going to wrestle with that in the upcoming General Assembly session. Don't tell your professors I said that. We also want to work with universities on students receiving academic credit for launching enterprises as well. So there are a number of things that we've put together a youth entrepreneurship council these are some of the recommendations coming out of that. But the third theme is entrepreneurism. Need much more of it than we currently have. Fourth theme is there are certain sectors that are growing, that are paying good wages. We want, from a public policy standpoint, to make sure we are incenting that kind of growth in the state of Virginia. In Virginia, that means cybersecurity, for example. We have as many assets in cybersecurity as any state in the union. We want to be the home of cybersecurity enterprises, of the biggest and the largest share. We want to be the leader in that. We also want more of our companies exporting. So international trade is a huge issue for us on the public policy standpoint. We've got to help companies get into the game. We've got to help them with trade missions. We've got to help them with marketing. We've got to help them with relationships. And so we've got a team at the state level that's working with companies across the state. By the way, 95% of the world's consumers live outside of the U.S. We expect our companies to expand and expand sustainably. We need to help them find customers outside of the country. So that's a huge issue for us. Since we're in the university, life sciences or biosciences, taking discoveries and technologies and intellectual property that our scholars here in the medical school and in the sciences in particular are creating and translating them into actual businesses is a piece that we're working on, and you're going to probably see some public policy action behind that in the next General Assembly. So was that 4? That was 4, right? 5th is the most important, and I'll stop with this and try to answer any questions. The most important thing, the most important strategy for a healthy economy is making sure that you prepare your workforce for the opportunities, in this case, for the opportunities of the 21st century. Now, here's a news flash. Don't want to depress you, but here's a news flash. So my first week on the job, I met with the president of North American operations for Unilever. Unilever in Virginia has a Lipton tea facility down in Suffolk. This Lipton tea facility processes 1 million bags of tea an hour, 6 billion bags of tea a year. It's the most productive Lipton tea manufacturing facility, if you will, in North America by far. Arguably one of their most productive around the globe. I sat down with this gentleman and he said, Unilever is going to invest $5 billion in the U.S. in the next 3 years. That caught my attention. I said, how does Virginia get $5 billion of that investment? He looked at me. I thought he was going to say, put your money where your mouth is. He said, nope. Prove to me you have the workforce I need to get the jobs done that we need done. I said, tell me what you need. He said, 50 to 65% of my workers do not need BA degrees. He said, but I need them to go to high school, I need them to graduate from high school, and I need them to go on and get post-secondary training. I know that's a terrible word in the academy, right? Post-secondary credentials in welding, post-secondary credentials as machinists, as mechanics, as coders. I need them to get these certifications and licenses and apprenticeships that businesses are demanding that we produce. Doesn't mean that we'll need fewer BAs or MAs or PhDs, because we clearly need as many of them as we can produce. And so everybody should take heart that they made the right choice. But in addition to placing emphasis on people graduating from UVA at the graduate or the undergraduate level. We need more people who want to be welders. We need more people who want to be electricians. We need more people who want to be machinists and coders. And we need more people who want to be healthcare assistants of all sorts. We have to have an ample supply of these folks if we expect our current employers to keep growing and if we expect to attract other employers here. So we are placing an incredibly high priority on our workforce system. Our workforce system, by the way, spends $362 million of workforce dollars a year. We are emphasizing credentials that matter to businesses being the end game of that work. So place no less emphasis on graduating from four-year institutions, but place just as much emphasis on people getting their associates of science degrees or getting the welding certification from the American Welding Society. And all these other, by the way, I got a BA in political science from Hampton-Sydney. I have seen some numbers of the market value of it. And then I saw the market value of an American Welding Society certification. All I can tell you is I didn't share it with my daughter. That's a joke. The bottom line is these jobs, I had an electrician at my home the other day. He spent 6 hours. At the end of it, he gave me a $3,000 bill. I looked at him. I said, $3,000 for a few hours. I said, I don't pay my lawyer that kind of hourly wage. And he looked at me and he said, I know. I said, that's why I gave up my law practice. That's a joke. That's a joke. The bill wasn't a joke for the rest. Bottom line for us is if you're going to, this is the headline, the number one strategy, the most important investment you can make for growing an economy, for growing it in a balanced and resilient fashion, is talent. It's not, all the other things I told you matter, infrastructure, incentives, right industries, entrepreneurism, all of those things are important. The most important, though, of all is talent. There used to be a saying that, that money will follow talent. That's still the case. Just as true is jobs will follow talent. Employers go to where the talent is. Because they can make up for some of these other things, there is no compensating for not having the talent. So for the students amongst us, you're doing the most important thing you can do. Get yourself prepared for the opportunities that will definitely be there. From a public policy standpoint, the job for us is to make sure that we have people who are prepared to be managers, to make sure we have people who are prepared to be middle managers, to make sure we have people who are prepared to work on the line, to keep the machines operating, to come to people's homes and get their electricity. We have to have that. And by the way, what an employer will tell you is that I need those folks that you're talking about now with the certifications and the licenses. I need them in place. Harder for me to recruit them from outside of a place that I go to I can recruit my senior team, but if you can't supply me with the welders, I'm probably not coming because it's harder for me to get a welder to move from North Carolina to Virginia, for example. So that really is the game changer. The place that will win will be the place that has the best prepared talent. And best prepared talent means you need it at every level. And you particularly need it at the level that I'm talking about now, technical and trade. If we don't get that, we won't grow. Now, last piece, and then I'll be quiet. You're also studying leadership, which I love. I will tell you that in the public sector and the private sector, without a doubt, the most important ingredient is leadership. The most important job to be done in the public sector and in the private sector is getting things done through other people. That's what leadership is. Getting stuff done through people. That's what a leader does. It is the biggest challenge, particularly in the public sector. It's been my experience, at least. But it's also the biggest challenge in the private sector. You can teach people how to do the job, right? But the leader is the person who has to bring folks together. The leader is the person who sets the expectations, who sets the culture, who helps negotiate getting to yes. If you don't have someone who can do that, you won't get stuff done. Or you'll get it done so slowly that it won't matter. I was at HUD. We have 9,000 plus people at HUD. We have, amongst the senior leadership, it was about 150. We'll try to stay out of trouble. We could have frozen all housing policy for the entire time I was there. Nothing new. Give us nothing new to do. If we had executed at business speed the policies and the jobs that we already had on the table, we would have changed the world, at least in our struggling communities. Our challenge was we didn't have enough A leaders to get the jobs done. So as you're here and you're thinking about public policy and leadership together, and I think I'll probably get in trouble for this one too, leadership is the most important of the two. You learn the policy stuff. But if you don't have leaders, it doesn't matter how good the policy is. You just won't get anything done. Exhibit A for that is a few miles up 66 and 29. It's paralysis. And what's missing is people who believe that the ultimate job is to get something done and to get it done fast. So I'm grateful for a place like this that focuses on both the public policy and the leadership piece. Because no policy can overcome a deficit on leadership. With that, I'll be quiet and thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Do I have time for questions? Happy to take any questions. Love advice. Yes, sir.
So you talked about how infrastructure is one of the key things you're looking at. So how do you see public transportation as a part of that plan? And in particular, how do you think the Silver Line in DC has kind of changed that or will change that in the future?
The Silver Line is a potential game changer. So Look, public transportation in the U.S. is a huge, huge need and opportunity. And the Silver Line is already, just the promise of the Silver Line. Look, Tyson's is probably going to become the largest, the fastest growing city in that region, largely because of the Silver Line. But let me add on to that. So people tend to think about public transportation in the urban settings. Makes sense. We got density. One of the greatest needs is figuring out a public transportation system for the rural areas as well. So we have to figure out how to get people from, we have to figure out how to get people from Greene to Richmond or Greene to Charlottesville, right? So, yeah, the public transportation piece is huge. Our challenge in Virginia is when you look at our investments, they're incredibly lopsided toward roads and highways. And so it's making the political business case for more balance there. High-speed rail, the Silver Line going out. The Silver Line will open up opportunities for tourism, for residential, for business, for more connectivity with DC. It's huge. But if I can get somebody from South Hill to Richmond for a job, that's huge too. A good question. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I've heard that the Secretary of Natural Resources is thinking about applying for about like $300 million in federal funding for an incubator to look at new startups in Virginia that would help with adaptation and resilience in the Hampton Roads area. Do you think there's any synergies between ex-military and their skill sets and that type of work? Or is there anyone looking at how do we capitalize on the skill sets of people that have served that? Because it was interesting as you were describing the trouble of laying line in rural areas. I've done work in Rwanda, and we worked to build a school. We had the same problem. We wanted to get a node for fiber optic
Yep.
at the school, and they were like, unless there's a company that's going to be making high use of it, we're not going to put a node in.
Yep.
And I was like, well, that's kind of interesting, like something that you're seeing with perhaps things that have been done in Afghanistan. Like maybe there's skill sets there that we can be using.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yes is the answer, and not just on the entrepreneurial side, but a number of other places too. I think our challenge is making sure that we are translating the experiences that our veterans are receiving on the job and educational while they're in service, that we're giving them a fair translation for transitioning to the private sector. And we're working on some things in that area to help with stacking credentials, giving more credit for academic pursuits, hopefully giving credit for experience that will shorten their ability or need for some of the academic post-service training that they'll have to do. But yeah, I think the veteran population is a huge asset that we have not utilized to the max, if you will. And so we are looking at doing some things there for sure. Yeah, good point. Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for being here
Oh,
today.
yeah, nice to be here.
So my question is on the last piece, on the workforce piece. What is one area where, you said the state spends $362 million on workforce. What is one area where the state's spending a lot of money and the outcomes aren't, you aren't achieving the outcomes that you wish you could achieve?
You just want one area?
Help me out. Start from the top.
In workforce, I think one of the areas that we're spending a lot of money on, and the question is how effective are we being, is in fact in a lot of, we confer a number of credentials, right? The issue is, are they credentials that matter? So again, I want to stay out of trouble here, but we confer a lot of credentials, for example, in cosmetology, right? Whether that money is better spent there as opposed to, well, whether that fits the need or the opportunity in the market in which those credentials are being conferred is the real question. It's the fit between where is the demand and where are we producing supply. And what I would tell you is, based on what I'm seeing, we are not doing a very good job of producing the product where there's opportunity. And that's more of a regional game. So in Northern Virginia, it's IT certifications, right? That's what we have 30,000 IT jobs unfilled across the state now. The bulk of them are in Northern Virginia. The bulk of them do not need BA degrees, but they need these, you know them better than me, they need these IT certifications. The question for me is, why are we not producing them in the supply that fits the demand? But yet I see a lot of other kinds of degrees out there. Now, a lot of this is our certification conferring enterprises are responding to what people are asking for, right? So a lot of this is, who's your client? Who's your customer? Is it the student? Is it the employer? Is it both? The truth is it's both, but you got to make sure that you're not doing the student any service if you're conferring a credential while there are 30,000 other jobs over here that are going unfilled. So what I would tell you is, I think our biggest opportunity with that $360-some million is getting a better fit between where the opportunities are and the competencies that we're training for. So that's what we're trying to do. Great question. One more, and then I'll get out of your way. Yes, sir. Oh, yes, sir. Well, then we'll take them both. How about that? I won't be Solomon. I can't split the baby. Yes, sir.
So you were talking about the imbalance between the federal and defense
or the public and the private, yes.
Right, and private. Bringing balance to that, is that a matter of, as you said, attracting out-of-state jobs with the right incentives, or how?
Not necessarily. In fact, great question, so I'm glad you asked that. If you look at the overwhelming contributor to private sector job growth, it is existing businesses expanding and adding jobs. So we've done 470 economic development deals in 20 months. 80% of those have been existing businesses that are adding. They're already here. They know what it's like to operate here. They have familiarity. They want to add a line of business or go to a new market. We've worked with them. They have relationships. They are a more efficient and effective spin than grabbing folks who are not here and bringing them here. So that's where we're focusing on expansion. That's why, by the way, international trade is so important. It is an incredibly effective business expansion strategy. Yes, sir.
So cities are more productive at generating wealth than rural areas are.
Is that a question or a statement?
It's a statement.
Okay.
So my question is, do you sometimes worry that the emphasis on rural development may take our attention away from the real wealth generating machines that are our urban areas?
Great question. What I would tell you is that growth actually happens on a regional level as opposed to cities versus urban. And so your focus usually has to be on a region of which there's usually at least one city that's at the center of it. There may, as in Hampton Roads, be 7 cities that are at the center of it. So if you're focusing on Northern Virginia, for example, no question that the big player there is Washington, D.C. It's the city, it's the central city. So no, I don't have, my sense is that economic development is a regional game, right? If you're gonna do it in Hampton Roads, you gotta focus on the rural and urban parts of Hampton Roads. If you're gonna do it around Roanoke, you gotta focus on the rural and urban parts of Roanoke. If you're gonna do it in Charlottesville, no way you can just focus on Charlottesville. When an employer is looking at a locality, that employer puts a dot and then he draws a circle, or she draws a circle within 60 miles. That's the labor pool. You have to do this on a regional basis. And so, no, I don't have any fear that rural development is going to detract from opportunities in the urban areas. My bigger fear is that people don't figure out that this is a regional game, that you have to look at a labor force, for example, the most important piece. You have to look within 60 miles of where you are and say, that's all my labor force. I am as good as I can credibly argue that labor force to be. That's, I think, our bigger challenge is we haven't gotten to that mentality yet. Greensville County focuses on Greensville County, which they have to do first and foremost. But their opportunity is Greensville, Lunenburg, Charlotte, and even into North Carolina. Same thing here. Charlottesville's opportunity is Albemarle and all the surrounding counties. Until we get that, we're going to miss opportunities. By the way, it's the same issue. Go back to infrastructure. I see this issue raise its head most pronounced when it comes to our regional airports, right? Because the bottom line now is, for example, a national airline will see a market from Richmond to the oceanfront. And the notion that we've got an airport in Richmond, an airport in Williamsburg, and an airport in Norfolk, and that we're going to be able to keep all of them healthy and sustainable and attracting enough airlines to make it work? Probably not an accurate notion. The region needs to be looking at sharing an asset. So I would tell you that our bigger challenge is an underappreciation of the power of regions. Thank you all for your time. All right, nice to be with you, yeah. Let me give you this microphone back here before I get in trouble.